Joining me now is Republican Senator David Perdue of Georgia. Senator Perdue, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Good morning, Chuck.
Let me start with a basic question here. What do you hope to learn from Thursday's hearing of both Judge Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford?
Well, first of all, I think Senator Grassley has done a great job of trying to accommodate Dr. Ford and getting this new information before the committee. I hope that we will get to the truth, and I think that's what the American people deserve, and that's what we're trying to do this week. I hope that both Judge Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford get an open hearing. I fully expect that this week.
How are you going to decide who's telling the truth if it really is just the testimony of Dr. Ford, the testimony of Judge Kavanaugh? We don't have anything else to work with here. How are you going to determine credibility in your mind?
Well, you actually do have other information. You have 4 other people who claim they have no recollection of the event. But what I have always done in a situation like this, Chuck, is look at it in a holistic manner. Look at the pattern of behavior over a period of time, and look at the individual information from the people giving that information, and decide my own personal belief in their credibility. And I think that's what each senator is going to do this week, hopefully, as we get this information before us.
Is there anything Dr. Ford could say that would change your mind about supporting Judge Kavanaugh?
Well, look, these are serious allegations. I hope Dr. Ford can be put in a comfortable situation where she can provide the information. Look, this is a democracy. We have a judicial system, but we also have innocent until proven guilty. And so my view is that we need to hear from both parties and make sure that we do it in a timely manner. We've already waited 3 months to get this information since the information was provided to Senator Feinstein. So it's time to have this hearing and get it before the American people. You
know, it's interesting you brought up innocent until proven guilty. The standard here, what should be the standard? Should it be, this is about a lifetime appointment in the Supreme Court. This is about somebody who has to decide the constitutionality of laws that impact all of Americans. Do you think the burden of proof in some ways should be higher or lower when you consider the job that Judge Kavanaugh is interviewing for?
I think the burden here, Chuck, is to find the truth, just like it is in any courtroom in our land. And that's what we're about to do. You know, we have people, this man has had 6 investigations, 6 FBI investigations. This isn't the first time he's been fully vetted.
But not one on this specific charge. Do you think there should be one on do you think at this point, though, you would want at least the comfort of the FBI having looked into this, even if it's for a 10-day period at this point?
Well, they've already done that. I mean, their job is not to determine who's telling the truth, but to make sure that the issue is brought before the body looking at it, and that's the Judiciary Committee at this point. This information was made public through Senator Feinstein, and so the way I look at it is the FBI has already done that. Their role in this case is not to determine who's telling the truth, is to make sure that the Senate has the information.
So you don't think there should be an additional investigation to at least establish if the party happened and establish some more facts? Have an FBI agent interview perhaps some of the other people that Dr. Ford says were at that house party?
Part of what the FBI is supposed to do is to make sure that they determine that this is an issue and to make sure that they bring it before the committee. We've had precedents on this before, and in this case, they have done their duty. And right now, the only people that are going to determine who's telling the truth in this issue are the United States senators.
Look, you were in the private sector before you joined politics. You ran Fortune 500 companies. I have no doubt you've faced similar issues, perhaps in leadership. How did you handle those? How did you determine truth? Because sometimes it is an allegation, and a person, you may think they're telling the truth, but they can no longer manage they can no longer fulfill their duties as a job because maybe they've lost credibility, fair or not. So how do you handle a situation like that? How did you handle it when you were in the private sector?
Well, I did have situations like this, and as long as 30 years ago, we started having training programs inside our companies to make sure that people's individual rights were protected and so forth. But when we had situations of allegations like this, we primarily made sure that the information, as best we could determine, was presented to the people making the decision. And in there, again, you looked at the credibility of the people giving the information, you looked at the pattern of behavior, and you try to take a more holistic view of this to get to a heart level gut level determination in your own mind about who was telling the truth. And that's what will happen in each one of the senators' cases as they listen to this information this coming week. I really expect we'll get to a decision this week and move on, Chuck.
Does public opinion matter to you? If more people oppose his nomination or more people don't believe him, should that factor into your decision making on this?
Well, there are two issues there. First of all, I don't put a lot of confidence in these polls. These are the same polls that had me losing by as much as 10% in my race 3 or 4 years ago, and we won by more than 8 points. It had Trump losing, so I'm not sure these polls clearly reflect the opinion of the American people. The other thing is that I believe that right now the information that the American people are getting is somewhat limited because it's coming through this central media in Washington, and not all of this has really come out yet. We will get all the information in the Senate this week, hopefully. We'll hear from both sides. We'll take that into consideration, and we'll make our adjudication.
Are things being rushed a little bit because of the November election deadline? I only ask that because I know you have said you want to see this moved on with. We are on day 75 since his nomination. I want to put up a chart here of the current members of the Supreme Court. 3 of them, actually, the confirmation process went on longer than where we are now. Sam Alito, 82 days. Clarence Thomas, 99. Elena Kagan, 87. What's wrong with taking a couple of extra weeks here to make sure we get this right?
You know, Chuck, if you're going to cite that statistic, you really ought to cite the fact that Ginsburg was confirmed in 42 days and got 96 votes.
That was up
as
there.
well.
That was up there in my chart as well. But I'm just saying we have 3 members that are on the court that it took longer. So we're not in an unusual situation yet.
No, and there's no rush here. I mean, we're
Okay.
following this very similar timetable that we did in earlier situations where similar allegations were made. Look, if we don't get all the information this week, I have total confidence that Senator Grassley will take his time and make sure we get all the information we need. There is absolutely no rush to judgment. I think any objective person, Chuck, looking at the way Senator Grassley has handled this, they would walk away thinking that he has done everything he can to make sure that this information comes before the Senate and that this person is treated with all the respect she is due.
All right, Senator Perdue, I'm going to leave it there for now. Senator, Republican from Georgia, thanks for coming on and sharing your views. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks,
sir.
Chuck.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.